Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are looking at a career that is often reduced to, a handful of keywords, headbands, wooden rackets, and a really abrupt retirement.
Yeah, that's about the sum of it for a lot of people.
But when you actually peel back the layers of Björn Borg's time on the court, you realize we aren't just dealing with a tennis player. We are looking at a specific cultural intersection, really, in the 1970s where sport became pop culture.
It's, you could argue it's the moment tennis went from this sort of country club pastime to a global rock and roll spectacle.
Absolutely. And Arthur Ashe, who is always so incredibly perceptive about the culture of the sport, he put it best.
He really did. He didn't compare Borg to, say, Laver or Emerson, the greats who came right before him.
Right.
He said Borg was bigger than the game. He put him in the same bracket as Elvis or Liz Taylor.
Which is a heavy comparison, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, Elvis was a performer, Borg was an athlete, but Ashe's point, it really highlights that Borg transcended the baseline. He was, I think, the first global superstar of the Open era.
For sure. And our mission today is really to unpack the paradox of that stardom. We have this kid from Södertälje, Sweden, who completely revolutionized the mechanics of hitting a tennis ball.
The Iceman.
He earned the nickname Iceman for his just superhuman calm. And then at 26 in an age where most modern players are just hitting their prime, he walked away, just gone.
It really is a study in the cost of perfection, I think. And we have a wealth of material to work through today. We're pulling from match archives, career statistics, a lot of biographical details, and even some new insights from his 2025 autobiography, Heartbeats.
It's a lot to get through.
So let's start with the origin story, because it completely contradicts that aristocratic image tennis had at the time. Borg wasn't a product of some prestigious academy or, a wealthy lineage.
Not at all.
The catalyst for his career is almost mythological. It's the story of the golden racket.
It really does have a fable-like quality to it. His father, Rune, was an electrician and a pretty good amateur athlete. He won a table tennis tournament.
Right, a table tennis tournament.
And the first prize wasn't money or a trophy in the traditional sense. It was a golden tennis racket, just this beautiful object. Rune gave it to young Bjorn, and that racket became his total fixation.
And that table tennis connection, it's not just a cute detail, is it? It's actually crucial for understanding Borg's technique later on.
Oh, 100%. Because table tennis relies so heavily on wrist action and spin. Right?
Yeah, exactly. You generate that incredible speed and dip through a really rapid snapping of the wrist.
And when Borg transitioned to the lawn tennis court, he didn't abandon that mechanic. He transferred it. He brought it with him. Physically, he was already a bit of an outlier. He was bow-legged, incredibly fast, and had this natural strength that let him swing a heavy wooden frame with unusual velocity.
But the establishment, the sort of tennis purists, they viewed his mechanics as fundamentally broken.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at coaching manuals from the early 1970s, the correct way to hit a tennis ball was with a continental grip.
Flat and through the ball. Very linear.
Very linear. Borg did the exact opposite.
He was a heretic in their eyes, a complete heretic. He adopted what we now call a Western grip, which closes the racket face and basically forces you to brush up the back of the ball violently to get it over the net.
And then there's the backhand.
The two-handed backhand, yeah. Today, the two-hander is pretty much the standard, but back in 1972, it was seen as a crutch.
A sign of weakness, almost.
Exactly, a crutch for players who lacked the strength to hit a proper one-handed backhand. I mean, aside from Jimmy Connors, nobody at the top level was really playing that way.
So the criticism was that his strokes looked jerky. They lacked that fluid, sort of long aesthetic quality of a Rod Laver.
They weren't pretty in the classical sense.
Which raises this fascinating sliding doors moment regarding his coach, Leonard Bergelin.
Oh, Bergelin deserves immense credit here. As the Davis Cup captain, he could have so easily tried to standardize Borg's game to force him to fit the mold.
The pressure to fix those jerky strokes must have been significant.
It was huge. But Bergelin, he recognized something. He saw that the jerkiness was actually the visual result of immense kinetic energy being transferred into spin. He made the crucial decision to protect Borg's idiosyncrasies rather than correct them.
It's a real lesson in coaching, isn't it?
Yeah.
Identify the function over the form.
Absolutely. If Bergelin had forced a continental grip on Borg, we likely lose the revolution of topspin entirely. The game would look very different today.
And we certainly wouldn't have seen the teenage sensation that just exploded onto the scene.
And it happened so fast. He makes his Davis Cup debut at 15 years old in 1972 and wins a five-setter right out of the gate.
Unbelievable.
He wins the Wimbledon junior title by rallying from a massive deficit. And then by 1973, he's a pro, reaching the quarters of Wimbledon and the fourth round of the French Open as a teenager.
That rapid ascent created this almost Beatlemania atmosphere at tournaments. But let's drill down a bit more into the technical revolution itself. You mentioned the Western grip and the brushing up the back of the ball. This is where the game fundamentally shifts from being about geometry to being about physics.
That's a great way to put it. Before Borg, spin was used for control or for a variety, a little chip here, a slice there to change the pace.
It was a tool in the toolbox.
Exactly. Borg weaponized the Magnus effect. He hit the ball much higher over the net than his contemporaries, which, in a pre-Borg world, should have meant the ball would sail long.
But it didn't.
But it didn't. Because he was generating thousands of RPMs of topspin, the air pressure difference would just force the ball to dive bomb back into the court, often right at the opponent's feet.
And the result for the poor guy on the other side of the net is a ball that just explodes off the surface.
It creates what players call a heavy wing. It kicks up, it jumps up above shoulder height, and it pushes the opponent back way behind the baseline. It forces them to play defensively from the first shot.
And we can't ignore the equipment setup he used to achieve this, right? The strings were different.
Oh, completely. He strung his rackets at incredibly high tension, sometimes up to 80 pounds.
Which is like playing with a board, essentially.
It is. It provides zero power assistance. You have to generate all the pace yourself with your own body. But what it gave him was ultimate control. He could swing as hard as he wanted, knowing the spin and that extreme string tension would keep the ball in play.
This style of play, just grinding from the baseline, hitting heavy topspin over and over, it must be so physically demanding. It requires a level of fitness that the old serve and volley era didn't necessarily demand.
Borg brought a level of athleticism that simply hadn't existed before. He could run all day. His strategy was often just pure attrition. It was, I will hit one more ball back than you, and I will do it for 5 hours if I have to.
This incredible endurance feeds directly into the Iceman mythology. And there's that specific statistic that has been cited for decades.
Oh, the heart rate.
The resting heart rate of 35 beats per minute. I've heard commentators say this during matches, even in recent years.
It is one of the most persistent myths in all of sports, and it's completely false. It's a great example of how we mythologize our heroes to make them seem, superhuman.
Okay, so what's the reality? Where did that number come from?
Well, Eugene Scott, who wrote the introduction to Borg's autobiography, he clarified this. Borg's actual resting heart rate was around 50 upon waking and 60 in the afternoon.
Which is still elite athlete territory, for sure.
Absolutely. It's world class. But it's human. The 35 figure likely stems from a Swedish military medical exam where a single reading of 38 was recorded. It was probably an anomaly or even a recording error.
But the press ran with it.
The press ran with it because it fit the narrative perfectly. The machine with the 35 pulse.
It explains his demeanor on court. But that Iceman persona, it wasn't just biology, was it? It was a psychological construct.
It was a mask. And a very heavy, suffocating mask at that. We see him on court, never complaining, never reacting to a bad call, walking between points with that distinct little stoop.
Always calm.
But his first wife, Mariana Siminescu, she provided a glimpse behind that curtain. She noted that while he was incredibly placid in daily life, his reaction to losing was almost pathological.
The 3 days of silence.
Exactly. If he lost a match, he wouldn't speak for 3 days. To anyone. That isn't just disappointment, that's a deep, internalized trauma regarding failure.
So he bottled every ounce of emotion.
Every bit of it, to maintain that Ice-Borg facade on court. And the pressure inside that vessel must have been just immense.
Well, that internal pressure cooker, it powered one of the most dominant runs in the history of the sport, specifically the impossible double.
The Channel Slam.
Winning the French Open and Wimbledon in the same year.
It is the ultimate test of a tennis player's versatility. You have the French Open on that slow, red clay, high-bouncing, rewarding patience, endurance, and sliding.
And grinder's paradise.
And then, just a few weeks later, you are on the lawns of Wimbledon. And we have to remember, the grass in the 1970s was totally different from today. It was lower, much faster, and slicker.
So the ball barely gets up off the ground at Wimbledon, whereas in Paris it's bouncing clear over your head. The adjustment in footwork and in your strike zone is just drastic.
That's why Wimbledon officials called it the most difficult double in tennis. And for good reason. Borg didn't just do it once.
No, he did it 3 consecutive years, 1978, 1979, and 1980.
I mean, just to give you some context, in the modern era, with more homogenized surfaces that play more similarly, only a tiny elite group, Nadal, Federer, Djokovic, now Alcaraz, have managed it at all. Borg made that impossible transition look routine.
His dominance at the French Open is statistically terrifying. He won 6 titles and was a perfect 6-0 in finals. But 1978, that tournament stands out as a complete statistical anomaly.
78 was the perfect tournament. He won the title without dropping a single set. But the granular stat is even wilder.
Go on.
Across 7 best-of-5 matches, he lost only 32 games total.
Wait, 32 games in the entire tournament?
32. That averages to losing roughly 4 or 5 games per match. He wasn't just beating world-class players. He was allowing them to maybe hold serve once per set. It was absolute suffocation.
Then he crosses the channel to Wimbledon, and the narrative has to flip, right? He can't play that same baseline attrition game on 1970s grass. He has to adapt.
And he did, brilliantly. He transformed into a serve and volleyer on his first serve, something he almost never did on clay. He flattened out his shots when he needed to. He just had this incredible tennis IQ.
And the result was 5 consecutive Wimbledon titles from 1976 to 1980.
Including a 41-match winning streak at the All England Club. It was just unheard of.
And that 1976 run was also without dropping a single set. It's hard to overstate how invincible he must have looked to everyone else on the tour.
He was a puzzle no one could solve.
But invincibility needs a challenge to be interesting. And that's when the rivals enter the picture.
Connors was the first real test. Jimmy Connors was the street fighter to Borg's cool assassin.
A great contrast in style and personality.
Oh, totally. And Borg lost to him in the 1976 and 1978 U.S. Open finals. But Borg eventually solved the Connors puzzle and overtook him for that #1 ranking. The rivalry that truly defined Borg, however, was John McEnroe.
Fire and ice. The contrast was so stark it felt like it was scripted by Hollywood. McEnroe, the explosive, artistic, volatile New Yorker against the silent, stoic Swede.
And this all culminates in the 1980 Wimbledon final.
A match that many still say is the greatest ever played.
It is the match that effectively separates that golden era from the modern era of tennis.
No.
Borg is going for his 5th straight title. McEnroe is the young usurper.
Let's focus on the psychology of the 4th set. Borg has match points. The trophy's right there.
He had championship points in the tiebreaker, and this tiebreaker is the stuff of legend. It went to 18-16.
I mean, that scoreline alone is just absurd.
It is. McEnroe saved 5 match points. Borg saved 6 set points. The tension was excruciating. Every single time Borg thought he had it, McEnroe would produce some piece of magic. Every time McEnroe thought he had the set, Borg would hit an impossible passing shot. Finally, McEnroe wins it 18-16.
Psychologically, that has to be a devastating blow. You've expended immense emotional energy, you had one hand on the trophy, and now you have to go play a 5th set against a guy who just pulled off a miracle.
The momentum is entirely with McEnroe at that point.
Most players would have folded. The mental tank would be empty.
But this is where Borg's legend is truly cemented. In that 5th set, he didn't just hang on. He elevated his game. He dropped only 3 points on his serve in the entire set.
That's incredible.
And at one stretch, he won 19 consecutive service points.
19. That is just machine-like focus. To be able to reset from the absolute chaos of that tiebreak to clinical perfection in the 5th set.
He wins the set 8-6. He lifts the trophy for the 5th time. But, and this is the crucial turning point in his whole story, Borg later admitted that during that match, for the very first time, he felt fear.
Fear? The Iceman.
He was afraid he was going to lose. He said he felt it was the beginning of the end.
Wow. The crack of the armor. And it didn't take long for that crack to shatter, did it? 1981.
The tide turns. They meet again in the 1981 Wimbledon final, and this time, McEnroe ends the 41-match winning streak.
Losing is part of sports. Great champions lose. But it was Borg's reaction to this specific loss that signals the end is near.
It is. He later said, "What shocked me was I wasn't even upset."
That's the real tell.
That apathy is the death knell for a competitor like Borg. Remember, this is the man who wouldn't speak for 3 days after a loss. Now he's relieved. If the hatred of losing is gone, the engine has just stopped running.
And the final collapse happens a couple months later at the 1981 U.S. Open. He loses the final to McEnroe again, and then we have what's just known as the incident.
It's a moment that just stunned the tennis world. The match ends. Usually there's a ceremony, speeches, photos.
Production.
Borg shakes hands, packs his bag, and just walks off the court. He walks through the bowels of the stadium, bypasses the locker room, bypasses the press conference, walks out the back door in his tennis whites, gets into a car, and heads straight to the airport.
It wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't a protest. It was an exit.
It was a ghosting. He just vanished.
Yeah.
Now, there were reports of death threats against him during that tournament, which adds a layer of anxiety to the whole situation. But the overwhelming consensus from sources is that his spirit was simply broken. He couldn't do it anymore.
And he was 26.
26 years old.
We really have to contextualize that. In modern tennis, 26 is often when a player peaks. Imagine if Djokovic or Federer or Nadal had just quit at 26. We would lose 2/3 of tennis history.
The tennis world couldn't process it. John McEnroe actually tried to talk him out of it. He called Borg, essentially begging him to come back.
His greatest rival.
Because McEnroe realized that without Borg, his own narrative was incomplete. The Joker needs Batman. He needed his foil.
There is a bureaucratic element to it, too,
Yeah.
right, regarding mandatory tournaments.
Yes, the Grand Prix circuit, the precursor to the ATP Tour, wanted to enforce a rule requiring top players to participate in a minimum number of tournaments. I believe it was 10. Borg, wanting to preserve his mental health and just reduce his schedule, refused.
So he was burned out.
He was burned out, and he basically said, I play on my terms or I don't play. They called his bluff, and he walked. He was done.
So we have a decade of silence, effectively. And then one of the most surreal and, frankly, sad chapters in sports history.
Yeah.
The 1991 comeback.
It's a chapter that is often mocked, but I find it deeply tragic. Borg is 35. He hasn't played on the professional tour in 10 years. He shows up at the Monte Carlo Open.
And he doesn't show up with a modern graphite racket.
No. He walks onto the court holding a wooden racket, a perfect replica of his old Dane that he won Wimbledon with.
We really need to explain why this is practically sporting suicide. In the 10 years he was gone, racket technology had shifted from these small-headed wood frames to stiff, large-headed graphite rackets.
The power and the speed of the game had just exploded. The sweet spot was huge now.
It's the equivalent of entering a Formula One race today in a vintage 1970s Lotus. It's a beautiful machine, but the physics are completely against you.
They are. The graphite rackets allowed players to hit harder with less effort and generate even more spin. Borg was trying to play a 1970s game against 1990s technology.
Was it hubris? Did he just think his talent alone could overcome the laws of physics?
It's hard to say. Maybe it was superstition, or maybe he just wanted to feel the game the way he remembered it, with that same feel of the ball on the strings. But the result was brutal.
He didn't win a single match in his comeback.
Not one. In his first 9 matches back, he didn't even win a set. It was this stark, visual representation of time just passing him by. The game he had revolutionized had moved on without him.
He did eventually switch to a modern racket in 1992, but the window had closed by then.
The window was long gone. He retired for good shortly after. But interestingly, while his tennis comeback faltered, his brand comeback was just beginning.
It is a strange irony, isn't it?
Yeah.
That for many younger people, particularly in Scandinavia, Björn Borg is a clothing label first and a tennis player second.
The brand became a fashion juggernaut. It was second only to Calvin Klein in Sweden at one point, but that success came after some significant financial peril. In the late 80s, his business ventures collapsed, and he narrowly avoided personal bankruptcy.
And there was that moment in 2006 that really highlighted those struggles.
Yeah.
A moment involving his Wimbledon trophies.
That was a real low point. The Bonhams auction house announced they would be selling Borg's 5 Wimbledon replica trophies and his 2 wooden rackets from that 1980 final. The implication was pretty clear. He needed the cash.
And this is where the Brotherhood of the Tour, sort of unlikely group, stepped in.
It's a really heartwarming twist in the story. Andre Agassi and Jimmy Connors reportedly reached out, but it was McEnroe who was the most vocal.
Of course it was.
He called Borg and allegedly said, "Have you gone mad? What the hell are you doing?" Agassi apparently offered to buy them himself just to keep them safe for him.
It just shows the incredible respect they held for him. They couldn't bear to see the symbols of his greatness sold off to the highest bidder.
It worked. Borg was moved by it all. He withdrew the items from the auction, and he eventually bought out the rights himself. He kept his legacy intact.
And since then, he seems to have found a much more stable and, frankly, happier role as an elder statesman of the sport. His captaincy at the Labour Cup has been a real highlight.
He's been fantastic there, captaining Team Europe to victory in 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2021. And who is sitting on the other bench, coaching Team World?
John McEnroe.
John McEnroe. Their incredible rivalry has evolved into this genuine, warm friendship. It's wonderful to see.
And we also have a new generation of Borg on the court. His son, Leo.
Yeah, Leo Borg, born in 2003, he's out there grinding on the Pro Tour. It's an impossibly heavy name to carry around on your back, but he's carving his own path.
We should also mention Borg's recent health scare, which adds another layer of vulnerability to this whole story.
Yes, in his 2025 book, he revealed he was diagnosed with aggressive prostate cancer in 2023. He underwent surgery in early 2024 and is now, thankfully, in remission. It's a powerful reminder that even the Iceman is mortal.
As we wrap this up, I just want to look at the numbers one last time, because despite the early exit from the sport, the sheer efficiency of his career is just unmatched.
That is the perfect word for it. Efficiency. He won 11 Grand Slam titles. He barely played the Australian Open, only once, I think. So he did this with limited opportunities.
But the stat that ends all arguments is his winning percentage,
In Grand Slam matches, he won 89.24% of the time.
which is the Open era record.
It is. Better than Federer, better than Nadal, better than Djokovic. Basically, if Björn Borg showed up to a major, there was a 9 in 10 chance he was winning that match, no matter who he was playing.
But there is that one glaring omission on the resume, the U.S. Open.
The curse. 4 finals. 2 losses to Connors, 2 to McEnroe. He played finals on the clay at Forest Hills. He played finals on the hard courts at Flushing Meadows. He just could not cross that finish line. It remains the only real hole in his resume.
Which leads us to the inevitable what if. If he just takes 6 months off in 1982, recharges his batteries and comes back,
Yeah.
does he win 20 slams?
Physically, he absolutely had the tools to dominate well into the mid-'80s, but I think the what if kind of misses the point of who Borg was.
Oh, so?
Borg's story isn't just about tennis, it's about the psychological toll of perfectionism. To maintain that Ice-Borg persona, to suppress every emotion, to train with that insane intensity, it required a fuel source that burned dirty. It completely consumed him.
So the burnout wasn't an accident, it was an inevitable consequence.
Exactly. You cannot hold your hand in the fire forever. He flew closer to the sun than anyone else in the 1970s, and the wax was bound to melt. The tragedy isn't that he stopped. The tragedy is that the sport required so much of him that stopping was the only way he could save himself.
He mastered the game, but the game nearly ate him alive.
That is the legacy. The perfect player for a brief, shining moment until the human being underneath just had to break free.
A fascinating look at a complex icon. Thanks for unpacking all of this with me.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.